6 o'clock on the East Coast for the meeting, August meeting of the Citizens Transportation Advisory Committee. Mr. Rideout, would you please do a roll call?
I'm actually going to defer that to our new staff member, Eugene, who's working our computer. They are our new public involvement in Title VI coordinator.
Hold on 1 second while you do that introduction. She's also doing some pictures and videos and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's he.
While we're doing the meeting, right? Okay.
Yeah. All right. So Tamara Banks. Yeah. Ruby Bravo here. Joe Brito. Justin Chenault. Rupert Farley.
Here.
Denise Flatley. Here. Robert Fogg.
Yeah.
Glenn Goldsmith. Larry Grove.
Here.
Yolanda here. Michael Hoyt. Cassandra Jagroup. Nicholas Putnofsky.
Here.
David McLaughlin. Ken Pogue. James Powell. Matthew Rowe. Rodney Thomas. Alan Watkins.
Here.
Clinton Wells. Timothy Welsh.
Here.
Kevin Wilkinson.
Here.
All right, we have a quorum.
All right, looking for a motion for the approval of tonight's agenda.
This is Rupert. I move approval of the agenda.
One second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Approval passes. Next item on the agenda is the approval of the June 12th, 24 CTAC meeting minutes.
Rupert, aye, move approval of the minutes.
Second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, that's approved. At this time, any public comment? Anyone in the hallway? Here to speak? Seeing none?
We do have,
Oh, okay,
Have some time.
go for it.
oh, also, if anybody needs, we also have, 2 copies. This first public comment from Jeremy Whitmer submitted Tuesday, August 13th at 6:36 a.m. I addressed this comment to the Citizens Advisory Committee. I live in the Austin Ridge neighborhood in Stafford County. I'm writing to express my deep concern with the planned Buc-ee's development to the exit of I-95 and Courthouse Road. Their estimates show 20,000 cars using that facility per day. Due to the hard work between FAMPO, the Board of Supervisors, and VDOT, with the opening of the express lanes down over the river, the traffic issues on and around 95 have eased recently. A decision of the magnitude of adding 20,000 cars on, off, and around the exit at 95 and Courthouse will have massive negative effects across the infrastructure of Stafford County and will cause ripple effects throughout the region on both 95 and the surface streets. As citizens, we ask that you are transparent to any requests or approvals you make as this process moves forward, and please keep the transportation needs of the existing residents here in Stafford and Spotsy foremost in your minds as you make decisions. Thank you, Jeremy Whitmer.
Any other comments?
Yes, our second comment comes from Joanna Whitmer, sent August 13th at 10:35 p.m. Members of the Citizens Transportation Advisory Committee, thank you for taking the time to read my concerns. I have lived in the Austin Ridge community in Stafford for the last 3 years. When my family and I moved here, we were so excited to find that the schools my boys would be attending was only 1/2 miles away. Our excitement quickly turned into fear and anxiety for all of us, especially for my oldest son, to the point that he didn't want to go to school. We found out that he was terrified of being hit by a car, and he then worried all morning if I had gotten hit by a car on my walk home after dropping him off. You see, in that first year, we had almost been hit 4 different times on that crosswalk that crosses Austin Ridge to get to the school. One of those times, a car had stopped to let us cross at the crosswalk, but the car behind him/her was too impatient and raced around, almost hitting us. Another time, we enjoyed a nice walk as a family to the playground. On our way back, a car going way too fast almost hit me and 2 of my sons at the same crosswalk. To avoid being hit, I had to push one of my sons back and pull the stroller back. When we started across the crosswalk, there were no cars in sight. If you have never walked across Austin Ridge at DeWitt and to Raleigh, I would encourage you to do so and see for yourself how dangerous it is. I also know of others in the neighborhood who have had similar stories. After these incidents, I went to a traffic engineer with over 50 years of experience to ask what can be done to make my neighborhood a safer place. He put together a study and came up with several ideas and sent them to the appropriate transportation people. Never got a response. A survey was sent to residents in Stafford asking about traffic safety issues. Our neighborhood sent in at least 100 comments, and we were told that there was nothing that needed to be done in our neighborhood. And yet it was after both things when the triple fatality happened on Austin Ridge Road. Austin Ridge Road already has safety issues. Buc-ee's will bring an additional 20,000 plus cars a day to an already dangerous road. Austin Ridge and Embry Mill are neighborhoods where kids get picked up from bus stops, where they play, where they walk to school, where they walk to the Rouse Center and soccer fields. It is not a place for Buc-ee's. Please take the safety of the residents in Stafford as more important than what Buc-ee's might offer. Please do whatever you can to prevent Buc-ee's from coming to Austin Ridge. Thank you, Joanna Whitmer. Noted.
That's it. All right, well, those are very interesting comments, good comments. All right, seeing no others, then, public comment is over. Item number 6, VDOT and transit reporter problem.
Well, the subject of the letters, could that be something we could run to VDOT?
We can forward those.
I think that's a great idea. I think that's who's gonna make those decisions anyway on Buc-ee's.
But.
With that in county.
So VDOT, yeah, Buc-ee's would be Stafford, yeah,
Oh, it did?
but
Oh, did?
the second person was talking about,
But
Safety.
safety.
yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
there are definitely well, it is a higher speed road, it's 45 miles an hour.
Mm.
And then, yes, there's many, because I used to live over there and would walk that path, sidewalk. And there's many people that they just don't pay attention to the crosswalk. People will start to cross and
Mm,
it's like, oh, that guy's not stopping, you know? I don't know, unless, other than a police officer stopping them.
Right.
If there's not a police officer parked there all the time, I don't know what you do.
The same problem on Tidewater Trail.
What's the
Go ahead.
sign?
Go ahead.
I'm in the corner. Has there been a safety study done over there? Is it public and what can we get a copy to see what the safety study?
So it sounds like they had a friend or somebody who was an engineer that did some sort of report that they sent to the board of supervisors, it sounds like, or maybe
That's-
VDOT. It's not clear who they sent it to,
Yeah.
but I agree with you, you need to see what did they send.
Well, if I'm understanding how to. Put something here, it has to be a safety study.
Mhm.
So can we get a copy of the safety study to see if it's something agreeable, not agreeable, what did the community actually say, because it has to have something.
I don't know that a safety, actual.
It had to have a safety study done in order for them to say they're gonna build something there, even if it's just a traffic study. Something had to be in writing, and say, yeah, let's go ahead and put 100 million car garage there, you know, something. There's gotta be something somewhere that shows there was a safety study.
Part of Buc-ee's.
No,
Not just
no,
on private
no,
properties, just
the
for,
order is, it's approved, and now VDOT will do the study to figure out what is the best way to engineer.
so nobody didn't see it.
It's approved by the
Usually-
planning commission, not by the supervisors.
So the supervisors haven't officially voted yet, are you sure?
Is it a rezoning or by right development?
Rezone.
It's a
I
rezoning.
think it's a conditional use.
Supervisors, and I would imagine that they would require a traffic impact analysis to be part of that rezoning, which would also follow.
If it's a
with-
rezoning, yes.
If we're, and also for a preliminary subdivision plan is usually required as well.
But is this area that they're talking about with the crosswalks in the area that is impacted
It's
by the
it's on the
Buc-ee's
same road,
road?
but it's not like in that.
Is the
specific
Buc-ee's
area.
closer to interstate
I
so
think
that
they're
it would
two
not
separate
affect it?
issues. I think the Buc-ee's coming and recognizing there's gonna be more traffic because of the issue with the crosswalk down by the subdivision. I think she's just looking at, there's gonna now be more traffic.
Yeah,
I think the first one was basically just against Buc-ee's, and the second one is like, hey, now that the Buc-ee's is coming, we're gonna have even more traffic.
Right.
So it would be beneficial to get information, so when we answer this, we have something to stand on. I would like to see the study.
I would
to
too.
see-
There might need to be a study done.
Yeah.
She said there was somebody who, traffic engineer for 50
Yeah,
years.
someone that she.
Yeah, but that's,
Yeah.
that's
Right,
like
that
a
was
private
different.
effort.
I understand, but
Yeah.
they made a statement that, you
They
know,
sent the report. That's what I said. It would be nice to see who they sent it to and what that entailed.
right.
Have to ask the letter writer to forward the report.
Yes,
Yeah.
there we go.
So,
Yeah.
Can we do that?
Yes, why not?
Sure.
Respond
no,
to
I'm
them and
just-
say, you know, hey, we received your letter. We're interested in helping you. Could you provide us the same report?
and who did it go to? They said they sent it,
Yeah,
they sent it
went
to government officials. Who
Mhm.
did it go to?
which government official?
Yeah,
So maybe, when responding, this we can ask who they speak with, so we can follow
Yeah.
up with that person, and again, y'all know I want to safety side of this. I am concerned about parties coming anywhere here since I actually visited one. It's massive. I'd like to see a safety study with the housing development here, the traffic, and if there's a sidewalk issue or crosswalk issue, will that make more problems? It's kind of, I'm for buckets, but I'm also against buckets coming because it's gonna make more problems. We're just gonna say the same thing right here. So let's get a study. It just see what it says.
Chairman.
I have a really stupid question. What is a Buc-ee's?
Oh,
Truck stop.
Oh,
it's not a truck stop.
It's like a Walmart and Sheets, basically like a Walmart size box with gas pumps, basically. wrapping all around it.
120 plus gas
120
pumps.
plus. And arguably the cleanest restroom.
Yes.
on the planet.
Yes,
Okay.
Yeah.
I think I did hear.
but no trucks. No trucks.
No trucks.
No trucks.
And their brisket's supposedly very good.
Big,
And their wall beef jerky, something to behold.
Yes, but it's definitely not like a.
traffic love. I mean, that's,
Their convenience store is as big as a wall.
I suggest we mandate.
Wow.
Especially like a
Yeah.
rest stop that you would find in Maryland along 95, except it's not going to be exit off 95 directly to
Can we
it.
get a copy of
Yeah,
that
I'll find
report?
it. Just-
Can you tell us who you sent it to?
Just go on YouTube
And then
and
they can
Yes.
report back.
ask
And then
about
a second-
Buc-ee's and you'll see lots
second
of.
Suggestion is that.
B
we
U
forward
C
those
C
two
E
letters
S.
to the county board chairman.
You're famous out west.
Yeah, Texas, Southwest, yeah.
The letter.
They're looking to put one down near Williamsburg.
Mhm.
Yeah, well, they're moving into Virginia.
And we don't approve anything.
Right.
So I would suggest you forward those two letters to the chairman of that county board of supervisors. And simultaneously email the person back and say, thanks, can you tell us
I agree with that
who
too.
sent, who you sent that?
Everything
That
Ian
and
said.
provide the email
Yes.
address.
Sounds great. A great
You're
idea.
gonna have to send them suggestions.
Yeah.
And actually, it might be a good idea to talk to them at the, also.
Hmm. Okay. Any other VDOT or transit reporter problems? Anyone? I will report the same problem I've been reporting in every meeting since I've been coming here. And that is and listen, I'm gonna get to the bottom of it if I gotta go to VDOT and hold somebody's hand and take them down there. Cause I followed a concrete truck through there last week and I thought he was gonna run off the road. Cause he almost lost it going over it. It's at the Caroline Spotsy line on 17. All right.
And then they started the roundabout work to celebrate FYI. They came through, they completely paved everything. And then they put up these digital signs that said, new four-way stop coming. So I immediately called Deontay Diggs. I was like, wait a minute, I thought a roundabout was going here. Why are we spending all this money paving roads and putting up these digital? He's like, oh, let me check into that. And he calls me back. He goes, no, they said it's for the roundabout. They said it's for the roundabout. So they put up temporary stop signs to make it a four-way stop with all these cones. And now they're laying the actual track for the roundabout. It's a hot mess right now. I know somebody's gonna get killed right now while they're building it, but they've started.
There's a celebrating banks for it. Okay.
Yeah,
We have a timeline on that?
No idea.
It's supposed to be completed by.
pretty soon.
Oh, really?
And
So exciting.
the reason that they probably paved was because it's not a permanent roundabout.
That's right, that's right. Like I said, they're building it now.
Yeah.
It's a hot
It's all made of composite materials that they actually screw into the ground.
ground, so that they can transition it as needed.
All right, all done with that subject. Moving on to the, had John put this on here since we have a lot of new people on the committee. And I came in on kind of the end of this study, which then generated the bridge crossing deal.
It kind of, a couple of different things kind
Yeah,
of came along,
all
but
right.
yes,
Well,
this
anyway,
was one of the.
I just wanted to bring the committee up to snuff on the east-west mobility study real quick. And
This
and
is
I'm gonna hand that to John.
other PowerPoint. There we go, perfect. So getting started, this is going like, I'm giving a quiz with the authors, standing or sitting behind us over there. But more or less, the FAMPO conducted actually a series of studies focusing on east-west movement in the region. Traditionally in this region, a lot of the focus has been on north-south movement. So if you go to the next slide, you'll see that kind of the way that the study was split up, there was initial kind of fact finding and kind of, I would say, condition survey that was conducted by FAMPO staff to kind of see, okay, is this something that's we're hiring this consulting and doing more research on? And that was phase one. And then later in phase two, we hired VHB to kind of look at the impacts of various solutions and VHB. With an SK. It's a large consulting firm in transportation. They are one of our 3 on-call consultants.
horn all the time. Okay, thanks.
So, and they split it up into kind of 2 main components. One focused on transit improvements, and the other one focused on roadway improvements. Bike ped improvements were actually split between the 2. So if there was a bike ped project that was primarily servicing like a transit facility or had a large transit component, it was kind of rolled into that. Or if it was more of a standalone project, it was kind of rolled into the roadway component. And both of these really did focus on kind of multimodal movement within the region. If you will go to the next slide. So if you go online, you can see and download all of these. This was the findings coming out, or the kind of the initial survey coming out of the phase one. Next slide. So one component was looking at the model to see, okay, what are going to be some of the main corridors, particularly from the for the east-west transportation movements. And what we saw was that actually a large number of segments, or a large component of our segments, are basically east-west movements kind of going along our central spine there. So we looked at that. There are also, if we go to the next slide, a very heavy kind of deep dive into some of our transit behaviors. So in this case, they actually were looking at where folks were coming from in order to access, in this case, the VRE. So we were seeing a lot of east-west movements starting to take shape, even in support of what we would normally consider a north-south movement. So in a lot of cases, particularly for our VRE stations, they kind of get split up as east-west horizontal catchment bases. So that was kind of an interesting finding coming out of that initial ones. Next slide. So with the VHB section of that, they kind of did a deeper dive. Next slide. And they produced very specific recommendations. So their findings resulted, particularly on the bike ped side of, we have a significant proportion of our VRE stations that may have limited or no kind of connections or access for bike ped movements, which is very surprising because a lot of them have very large residentials. And this also turned out to be some of our more congested corridors, saying this is kind of low-hanging fruit, something that's easy that could actually help alleviate that traffic movement. They recommend things like Trails to the Brook Station VRE, Benchmark Road and Spotsylvania's VRE station. They also looked in a couple of corridors where you could do a reconfiguration. So Chatham Heights was actually a roadway. They're like, it's a 4-lane road now. You really kind of don't need that. You actually have a different need that's kind of forming there, and that a 3-lane configuration could actually provide the same level of service while also providing bike ped infrastructure along that without increasing the footprint. On the transit sides, they also had recommendations that kind of some of the biggest issues is that you needed a high capacity, high frequency bus routes, kind of fast, frequent, reliable, kind of kept up. So they ended up promoting like a frequent route service that kind of went through downtown Fredericksburg, the hospital area, and into Central Park. I think at one point in time, it suggested going a little bit further into Spotsylvania, but that was later revised back. The VRE feeder station for the Spotsylvania station, which is slowly coming past, as well as other kind of express bus ideas. So they actually did multiple transit alignments and routes and testing to try to figure out the market capacity as well as the feasibility and costs within them. Those are all in the report. Next slide. On the roadways, they kind of identified some of the main corridors. We had about a dozen, actually a little bit more kind of deeper dives into some of these corridors that looked at potential solutions and build outs of what can you do that would basically alleviate congestion looking out. And if you see some of our most congested corridors out into the future are our east-west corridors. And so things like Courthouse Road, we've heard that tonight, was a major one. We're expecting a very high congestion ratio even if the total volumes aren't there, the congestion is. And other routes throughout that network, particularly east-west movements, and of course you keep seeing a constant theme is that east-west movements near the north-south main arteries become very congested because you have both east-west traffic having to mix with north-south movements. You can't get around that. So
Courthouse Road in Stafford or
Stafford
Spotsy?
in Stafford.
Stafford.
Mhm. Actually, Courthouse Road in Spotsylvania is also down there at the bottom too. So it's one of those. So next slide.
Just before you do that slide, just go back. You see this column here? So when a road is at capacity, that number is 1. It means for every space on the road, there's a vehicle.
Realistic 0.9, people will say it's.
Yeah, but before you complicate it. 1 means the road is full, it's totally congested. If it's less than 1, there's a little bit of space left, depending on how big the number is. So the smaller this number is, the more space there is on the road and the less congested it is. When you get close to 1, that's it. You're going to sit in traffic every time you use it. When you go over 1, it's a disaster, right? So that's how to know what's bad, is this is the vehicle divided by the capacity. So you've got 1,000 vehicles, there's space in peak traffic for 800, you're over capacity, you need to build another lane or get people off the road and into buses or trains or something. So that number is important because that tells you how badly congested the road is.
We're
adding a Buc-ee's to replace that
as the highest.
Yeah.
Right, I see that.
Congestion.
No wonder.
I have a question about that. What is considered peak? I mean, is it an hour, 2 hours?
So traditionally it's the PM window. So it's going to be normally between 4 and 6.
2 hours.
So
You measure the peak by how much traffic there is, not the other way around. So if it's morning rush hour or evening rush hour, the peak is measured by how long it's congested. So
And that's what I was asking though, is it congested for 2 hours or is it, if you've got a school drop off, it's congested for 20 minutes, but so I was trying to figure out if it was like a 2 hour or,
So it really depends on the entity. So in our studies, ours was the PM peak, that PM evening rush hour. It could happen in that 15-minute window, but it'll be captured in that kind of 2 hour kind of frame. Sometimes it's 3 hours. So like in my previous year, we didn't have an AM peak at all. So it was all PM. Actually, our AM peak happened at 10 o'clock in the morning, not during the normal commute. So it can vary, but that's basically looking at what time of day is the absolute worst. And it's usually going to be, when does that happen within a 2 or 3 hour window? Because yes, sometimes schools you can have micro peaks, but they're really looking at if it's like 99% congested through a 3 hour window, that's going to probably be your peak, even if there's a small spike when schools go back into session on like the first day or two, which gets really bad.
What's sad about Courthouse Road and Warrington Road both, in the last 5 years, we've just rebuilt those interchanges. And we spent hundreds of millions of dollars. And now we're talking about both of those in not so many years ahead are going to be so over capacity that they're going to be nothing but a big, huge parking lot. So where did we go wrong there? Who went wrong?
I told you went wrong. Maybe the next slide will show it. I'm not sure what the next slide is, but the next slide should be a summary of no bill future traffic conditions with congestion pricing applied. Congestion pricing would have solved all this and would have brought in a boatload of money that we could have used for transit. We didn't do it. But I'm sure this is part of the options that are going to be considered. Am I correct?
No, unfortunately not.
Why not? Why not? It's idiotic to choose this option when you've got a better option. It's just because it's not legally available now, we need the data to get it changed.
We did do a study on, we did a presentation on congestion pricing, didn't we?
So, okay, if we can go to the next slide, is what the consultants actually kind of identified as projects
Hold on.
that could potentially
Time out.
help
When
alleviate
was this study done?
2021 through 2022, correct?
So do they take in consideration the interchange improvement?
So they were built
Okay,
in,
okay, all right, okay, move on.
like, for example, Courthouse Road, the interstate reconfiguration was
Okay,
included.
with the
so,
diverting
yeah.
diamond.
Mhm.
Okay, and then talking about putting buckets up there, okay.
So the
okay.
answer to your question is
Makes
there on the
sense.
screen. If you look there, widen Garrisonville Road to 8 lanes. I'm answering your question now, not Ruben's. So you see there, the recommendation is for 8 lanes. We're now arguing about making it up to 6 lanes. But already, the model showing you need 8 lanes for the capacity. We're trying to find the money now for the 6 lanes. So that's why by the time we built the 6 lanes, it's gonna be full. There's the problem, they're right there.
Well, if you're looking at 2050, do you have the density at that point to start pursuing transit options like light rail and?
So right now, we don't have the population for light rail.
Right, but in the projection for 2050?
Well, I haven't looked at the population from 2050, but we certainly continue to be the fastest growing region in Virginia. Still, 25 years later, we're still the fastest growing region in Virginia. This region grew faster than any other region during COVID. We continue to grow. But we're coming from a very small base, right? 25 years ago, the population was very small. And if we were to implement light rail now, which Jane Leeds desperately wants, we would be the area in the entire United States with the smallest population having light rail, which means the ridership is going to be very low. And then everybody who voted for it is going to then complain, where are the riders, right? Because there's a relationship between population and ridership. And I did not a full study, but I did an examination of all of the light rail systems in the United States. And we have a population that is smaller than those regions or cities are that have light rail. So we would be kind of crossing our fingers and hoping that somebody's going to jump on the train because the population is very small, but it's a fast growing population. So there will come a time in the future when we will cross that boundary, but it's not going to be for 20 years.
So like right now, like Norfolk is one of the smallest metropolitan areas with the light rail.
And we're way smaller than Norfolk, so.
Well, I mean, my point was to look at the 2050 projection, because we're talking about widening Garrisonville Road to 8 lanes. That, I mean, this is where I start to sound like Rupert, and agree. That's just too much. We're expanding too much.
Between 600 and 700,000 people, so we'll still be about 40% Norfolk's current size.
It would be a lot cheaper to build a bus rapid transit system than it would be to build light rail. And if a bus rapid transit system fails, you can convert that lane into regular car traffic. So you're not like stuck with it. Whereas if you build light rail, you can't convert that into much else. You're stuck with it.
Trail.
Trail.
Bills to start
These bus studies, so I guess my question is back to, is our goal to move people or economy farms? So if our goal is to move people, then I have to agree with probably. But
You've got a fan.
no, I'm not a fan of just question. So that's my question. Are we doing this to move people and goods, or are we doing this to accommodate cars? If we're going to move people, then yeah, we can push transit a little bit better, see if the roads can handle 40-foot buses, and I know in this area I know it's not, or maybe get more buses on the road. But if it's just to accommodate cars, we shouldn't talk about transit, because you're already saying you're putting on the same.
So this study recommends that you have a high capacity transit route as a first project to see whether the ridership will buy into the transit system. And if it works, then you build more. If it doesn't work, at least you try. So the study recommends one first high capacity transit route. These people.
Yeah, I'm trying to distill like several hundred slides of information down. I am like just skipping even barely the intro slides, so, because there are transit deep dives in this report.
Right, and I'm all for
Yeah.
transit, because all BRTs I've been to, there are larger buses, there are 40-foot buses, and I don't, everywhere I'm in this area, it doesn't seem like we can actually accommodate a 40-foot bus, unless it's on one of the routes like 17, Route 133, all of those, and right now we're using small buses, the, 20 passenger buses, so I was just wondering, can we accommodate with BRT? Or can we make like a little mini?
I mean, I think, I'm sorry for, I apologize. Maureen.
Stop trying to learn to.
I think the answer is what Ian was saying, is doing the high capacity transit route, which is basically putting an extra lane that's designated only for the bus. And I mean, you're right, we have these little micro buses, we don't have the big long buses, but practice, I mean, for lack of a better term, the high, with a high, transit with a high capacity transit route, and then seeing if it works, and then get the capacity. I had a question is, do we have the maps of the urban development areas for each county here, right?
Used to.
Okay, and because I have never seen that for any of the counties. I was just wondering if we could, because that would answer a lot of your questions. Where's the population going? Where's going to be the higher density areas? And then, based on that, they have the comp plans always, is a basis for figuring out, calculating, populations are.
So on your agenda tonight, the RPA discussion story map. No, sorry, it's not that one. It's cost 3D map.
Yeah.
So we have it.
We do have that, and we have like 3D of
We have a 3D
the
version
land use
for the whole
the-
region.
and the traffic. So,
Thank you.
okay.
For what it's worth, I think it's an unfair comparison, not the right word, to have one transit project tossed out, when you're competing with it, dozens of incentives to take cars. That'll never work. I mean, as long as you're subsidizing cars 10 times more than you're subsidizing transit, you're fighting against it. It's ridiculous to expect it to work under these conditions.
You don't know?
So these are the projects that the consultants identified that would basically look to try to get us as close as we can to kind of solving that 2050 congestion. And in some cases, you can see that a few of those may have multiple options that you can do, or have options that kind of work in between them. So like Warrenton Road or Truslow, Enon, Raymond Courthouse Road have a couple of different options. In some cases, Route 3, you might only have one, or if it's Garrisonville, you might only have limited options. So some things you kind of have a different menu. And if you go to the next slide, they also looked at, say, if you built those projects, what would be the result to congestion for those? So if you built out a Western network, you could actually see regional reduction in congested travel drop by about 10%. And various roads would have different amounts. So Courthouse Road, a -3% is actually not a bad take, but Truslow Road would see a major improvement because it's kind of serving as that route right now, but it's kind of a different level. A river crossing would actually ease extremely congested travel a lot because it takes vehicles, it gives that extra option. But Warrenton Road would see a net reduction, Ball Hill would see a net reduction, but you'll see, say, in their study, Route 3 sees a +1 and Cowan Boulevard sees a +2. But when they combine the Western Network and the river crossing, they saw an 18 and 20% reduction in either congested or extremely congested travel. They were like saying, if you're going to build something, reducing regional congestion by 20%, that's a big needle mover. They also looked at the Harrison Road interchange. It has a big reduction in regional traffic, It has the best impact for Route 3 and Courthouse Road in Spotsylvania.
That is significant. There's not another project we know of in the region that can help Route 3 as much as this project. So that Harrison Road interchange helps Route 3 because you can get onto I-95 without going anywhere near Route 3.
Other than building another large capacity high thing that's parallel to Route 3, where folks are going, that would be the other kind of thing that would pull off Route 3. Mills Drive widening, we see a change in congestion because it really drops Mills Road, but notice that it gives a +2 to extremely. It's loading up more into Mills, so if it hits traffic elsewhere, it's going to create a worse. Garrisonville Road, and apologies for the typo there, it's not in Mills Road, but you see again, 8 lanes helps Garrisonville Road about 15%. It's the biggest thing it can do, but you see the bump again in extremely congested that it's going to expand capacity. So if there is an issue, it's going to kind of trickle down and make everything a lot worse on that.
That 4% that Ian was bragging on Route 3, is it safe to assume that that's for the first year? The next year will be 3%, the next year will be 2%, the next year will be 1%. 0 plus 1, so that way it works.
That would be by 2050. Like it looks at the no build versus non, as in it reduces congestion at 2050 by 4%. In some cases, we do see from other modeling efforts that you actually see, depending on the project, that you actually see as time goes on, the congestion actually tends to. The benefit to the network gets better, even though congestion might get worse, because not having something later on versus having it early on is always kind of a slow kind of builds with interest.
But it will induce more congestion. In the long run, it induces, you build it, they will come. You build highways, it induces more congestion. That's the way it's always worked.
We're in a place, they are coming, they have come.
No, they
that's
come,
the point.
you encourage them to come when you build more capacity. That's been proven over and over again. Am I wrong?
I think we're behind the 8 ball. We're not ahead of the 8 ball, we're behind it.
So,
Well, I mean, it's already here.
Rupert, they're building.
yeah, well, we've had congestion back and forth, even built the interstates. I used to live here back then. Route 3 used to be, Route 1 was crowded, people going back and forth onto DC and Washington. But that number exploded when you built 95 and you added that capacity. It was pretty obvious for anybody who lived there back there through it.
They're building
more highway capacity, it induces more traffic, it induces more people moving here, it induces more sprawl, it induces screwing up the planet.
They're building the apartments and they're building the subdivisions, whether we build another road or not.
It encourages more of the same. We would never have had this much growth if we never had built 95. All those apartments you're talking about would be up there in DC on the bus line. You're right, they would have been built because of population. Nobody's stopping the population, unfortunately. But, they would not have been built here. The fact that you provided all this capacity is why we have the sprawl here instead of up there in DC.
I have one question about the river crossing there. It says it will decrease it by 10%. I don't quite see that, when really the only thing that I see the river crossing where it's suggested to be laid out right now is really going to be just paralleling 95. I don't see where it's going to be affecting anything except it'll be taking traffic off of the 95 corridor that we just put in. And I don't see it affecting what is the regional area itself, only just that small segment there. It's bringing it through, if it goes through the way that it has been suggested so far, is it's going to be going through Central Park. But as far as the region, I don't see it affecting it at all.
We're gonna get to,
We're
gonna get to the river crossing in a little bit.
Okay.
We'll touch base on that one here in a bit.
We have the congestion maps from the travel demand model that shows the reduction. So it reduces traffic, for example, around the hospital, reduces traffic on 17. It reduces traffic on the first section of Route 3 from I-95 to Bragg Road. It reduces traffic on Ball Hill Avenue. There's a whole kind of series of roads that it reduces traffic on. And the other thing it does is it makes your trip shorter. So you travel less miles because there's a direct route now instead of going. I mean, your former chairman told us in the meeting that he goes down 17 under I-95 to get on US 1 to go down to this side of the river to get on, I don't know, one of the other east-west routes to go back west again, right? So it cuts down on those trips. So that's 17 US 1 Route 3 cuts down on the traffic there.
I'm not alone, there's other people doing that too.
That's
That's
that's a cumulative 10%. All those pieces together.
Right.
Can go to the next slide. And during this project, that there was a massive kind of public outreach. So it had probably one of the largest, most active stakeholder groups that was going on. I think there's well over 20 folks on that stakeholder group from a lot of different backgrounds. There were multiple surveys, both officially a part of this process, as well as other surveys that were happening tangentially along it. But with this survey, we had over 1,000 responses, and it was asking very simple questions like, hey, what about a I-95 interchange at Harrison Road? Yay, nay, put it up at Central Park. We gave options. What about creating a bicycle path lane on Chatham Heights? That was a question. Paths on Fall Hill and Central Park, and of course the river crossing. We also asked folks to just say, tell us which road is, a bad or problematic for you. So you can see Warrenton Road led it, followed by Plank, and then none of the above. So there's actually a large amount of folks who say there's nothing wrong with our roads. So
Those are pedestrians.
yeah, well, maybe. But so you can see that. And my thing is like that Truslow, Mountain View, Courthouse Road, Butler Road, kind of that in-between middle section. They're all in the middle section of response. So they're not like Truslow Road isn't the one that has the high Route 17. But if you look at that network, there's a lot of respondents that say that type of movement is a bit of a challenge. So if you want to go through it, I highly recommend if you go to the next slide, check out the full reports, and I would say reports, if you really want to have a deep dive, or if you're looking for that, even if you're looking at saying, hey, what transit routes did they consider, and look at it, what are the timings, the expected riderships, there's a lot of information on those reports. So.
All right, anything else, any other discussion on our east-west mobility study?
Does that report tell how long these figures last before? I know they're not sustainable, but are there projections of how long we expect these congestion improvement numbers to last?
They were looking at the 2050 model and what they could do, both if you implement them in the near term, as well as what their impacts would be in the long term, depending on what the project and the parameters.
Sounds like you avoided the question.
I just.
Huh?
It means like, these numbers are good for 2050.
Yeah. But what I'd like to know is how good are those numbers going to look at 2060?
They don't say that.
They don't say. That's a nice thing about tolls, such as congestion pricing. You can adjust those as you need, and you don't have to worry about them. They are sustainable, unlike any of these projects. That's all. Thank you.
Going overseas.
I have a question to comment. This is Glenn Goldsmith from Stafford. Relative to what Rupert was just saying, if we go back to just real quick here, back to that slide, summary of no bill future traffic conditions. Relative to what was just said, if this only goes up to 2050, then I don't want to assume, but I think this is what Rupert was saying, and I kind of agree with him. If these numbers right here only go up to 2050, then what does happen getting in 2030, 2040, 2060, and so forth? These numbers have to go up if the roads are there. That's all I want to kind of just add to that as far as if there's any value in that comment. That makes sense? I mean, this chart like goes to 2050. So what happens after
Right.
that? All these numbers just double and triple at that point? Or do we have such a bottleneck that the ones really go to 3s and 4s? Because right now, if they're saying 2050, westbound and eastbound, let's say the top two, the first one and the second one, if that one represents there's no more traffic on the road, as I think Ian said, or John, I'm sorry, then that number will go to 2. That number's already almost 1.5 now. So that number does go to 2. And if it goes to 2, then what happens?
Right.
Chairman, any study you do, you can pick any design year you want, and the model will give you an answer. But typically, I mean, we can model 100 years worth of stuff if you want, but it's just an endless game, right? So if you want, we can get the travel demand model to model the year 2060 or 2070 or 2100. It's just every single year between now and when we're all dead just seems,
What it would prove is what we're doing, what we've been doing for the past 50 years is not sustainable.
That's kind of what I get out of that, because like you said, you can pick any number and it is a game. But at the same token, if we're supposed to be improving traffic conditions, I mean, we're really not doing that. We're just playing the game, just putting the numbers and getting a survey and building the roads onto that. And then 5 or 10 years from now, we got to do the whole thing all over again. That's what this, in my opinion, that's what this chart right here really dictates. If you minus and go back, we're in 2024 now. If you go back, as Rupert said, you go back 20 years. I come from DC, so I apologize. I can't even get to you guys by 6 o'clock. I work right at LaFont Plaza. Okay, the reason I'm always on the phone, I can't get to you. But so this chart really means more than just numbers. I think we should be really, not to say we're not doing that, but thinking about how we're building these roads, what we're doing, and where's the value in what we're really doing here, and taking traffic off the road. Or as that other chart said, 8 lanes on Garrisonville Road. That's where I am right now. I'm on 610. So it's going to be 10 lanes, because 8 lanes going down to 3 or 4 to get on the Beltway, that's not going to work either.
I have a question. Sorry, this may be a little bit funky. My name is Jason Brown. I'm with Stafford. I think I'm technically part of it as well. And maybe this is a little bit far afield, but these these numbers and solutions are based on projected growth over the next 26 years. Is there, and I don't mean to sound like a heretic, but is there talk about artificially arresting population growth over time by stymieing land development over that period?
It's illegal to prevent people moving into your area.
No, not prevent people from moving, but not having new builds pop up nearly as good.
It's based on a comprehensive plan. Comprehensive plans for each county establishes
Their growth.
target growths, yes. And then based on that, I mean, those comprehensive plans usually go out, what, 20?
They go out every 6 years.
Yeah, but they need to be updated, but the
They-
time out, it gives
I
us
see.
20 years.
Yes.
After that, it gets, the numbers get so fuzzy that you can't really rely on it. So what you're asking, and I agree with you, Rupert, I totally agree with you. That's why I went into planning. That's why I went into landscape architecture. But I'm also trying to work with the state and the system that we have right now. And that's what the problem is that we have a system where people, it does have, we can only expect people, we can only plan for 20, 30 years. We can't, like you said, we can't make, direct people where to live and where they don't live. We can't tell people don't have any more kids, or anything like that. That's crazy talk. But at the same time, we have to do some kind of planning. The further out you go, the less, reliable those numbers are. And if they're less reliable, then that's a very hard sell to say, we need to build a new light rail system to Fredericksburg because we think it's going to grow by 2060, it's going to be huge. I'm not disagreeing with you, but I'm just saying that you have to incrementally plan for this stuff.
Yeah, I wasn't telling people not,
Oh, I know.
just don't move in. I'm just saying like if these projections are based on like building a current rate that we're building, right? What about reducing that build rate, so you can more accurately kind of account and stretch out that dollar, or at least make a more predictable model. I don't know that, like the left-hand, right-hand talk.
And you're right, I mean, that's why the state has done things like the urban development areas, where they try to concentrate the growth in there. And by doing that, they try to concentrate the dollars that are spent for, transit and, transportation projects in those areas. So that we're not expanding the road out. Now, I'm talking more than I probably should.
And I'm sorry, I didn't mean to take this off. I was.
Well,
That's a good point, I mean, because it's hard to.
you want to make something else on the east-west study, Ian?
So on this topic,
On that topic?
I want to just give you some big picture points. Problem, and Rupert identifies some of the elements of the problem, and so do some of you. It's a perennial problem. This is going on all over the United States all the time, except in areas where the population is dropping, right? So in those areas, this doesn't happen. But because the population is growing, we face these issues. One of the problems is that the cost of housing further north is more expensive. So people are moving further and further out from the metropolis of Washington, D.C. to find more affordable ways to live. So everybody, not just this region, but in Maryland, in everywhere else, they're experiencing this problem. People are moving further and further out, right? So a town planning decision they make in Washington, D.C., for example, they've got a cap on the height of buildings. You cannot build a building in Washington, D.C. beyond a certain height since 1928 or something. So that suppresses the amount of units of living space you can build in Washington, D.C. Because of that, residential property in Washington, D.C. is expensive. So people are going further and further out to find affordable housing. Housing that's affordable, should I say. So they're going to move here. And you can try all sorts of tricks. Stafford downzoned a bunch of their rural neighborhoods. Spotsy did it previously to try and control that, but it's not working. Spotsy has approved 20,000 units that haven't yet been built.
Yes.
And Caroline
And
is the fastest growing.
We don't have all the tools, you mentioned that. We could direct every development to pay its own way, and if they did, we wouldn't have all this sprawl. I'm saying we're subsidizing them like crazy. We're not requiring them to provide, main thing is we're not requiring every development. I'm talking about residential, commercial, industrial, every development to provide class 1 transit to its development.
Correct. However, state of Virginia has taken decisions which prevent the local counties and the city from requiring those things. It is not legal currently for Stafford and Spotsylvania and Fredericksburg and so on to do that. It's illegal what you're describing. So what you need to do is take that fight to the state. In the meantime, we still have to deal with this problem. Now we're caught, and I've been thinking about this for 4 years. I've been in that office for 4 years thinking about this. We are caught between a rock and a hard place, and here's why. And then I'll shut up after this. We don't have enough population to build light rail or significant transit, right?
We don't have the density.
We don't have the density. We don't have the population either. The population of 360,000 people is not enough to build light rail. You need 1 million people before you start doing that. They did it in Hampton Roads, and it's not achieving the ridership, right? So if we just put in, hang on, let me finish. You speak a lot. I'm just going to finish, and then I'll sit down and you can, Chairman, go. If we put in a light rail now, there'd be nobody on it. 3 people, right? There would be nobody on it. So it's a lot of money to invest
and then nobody rides the light rail. So we have to wait. However, because we're the fastest growing region, from a small population base, we caught. The population is growing too fast for the road system, but it's not big enough to put in light rail. So we're stuck in that gap, right? And in that gap, we still have to get people to work and to school and to wherever else. So we're trapped by the statistics, and we can't push it away. It's not going to go away. We have to deal with it. And we have to deal with the fact that land is cheaper here than it is in Washington, D.C. That's not going to go away either. So in that environment, we're caught in this scenario. The best we can do is run a better bus system. However, academic study after academic study after academic study can find no relationship between regular buses and congestion reduction. You only get congestion reduction when you put in rail, because you don't move enough people in the buses. And unless you put in a BRT, the buses are stuck in the traffic next to you in your car. So they don't go any faster. So the only time you have an impact on congestion with transit, which is what I believe in, I'm really a transit advocate to the point that I annoy people. The only time you get congestion relief with transit is when you have big transit. You got to put in a subway system or a commuter rail system or whatever to do that. But right now we have VRE, and they're struggling to get riders because since COVID, people jumped off and people are working from home. So we caught again. We caught again between providing more transit or dealing with the fact that people don't want to get on the train. And so if Rupert could find for us the way to convince those people to leave their car at home and stay off I-95 and get on the train, we'd fix a big chunk of the problem. But we can't right now. Just like we can't stop people moving into our region, we can't force them to get on the train and leave their car at home. So that's the dilemma that we're in. We're in this difficult spot. 50 years from now, you'll have the population to put in major transit. Right now, you don't. And it's real expensive. So me, the one who advocates for transit, is telling you that we have to put in a good bus system, maybe an improvement on the bus system we have now. And we have to do what we can in the interim on the roadways until we get the population that's big enough to put in a transit system. None of those facts change, right? We can get clever, we can argue for years, we can whatever. None of those basic metrics change. Until you can convince people to shift to taking VRE, I-95 is going to get full. And we are doing a lot to upgrade the rail system. We're putting in a third track. We are upgrading all the stations. We are going to double the number of trains by 2030. So it's not a capacity problem. The capacity will be there. It's a behavioral problem. So you need to get into behavioral psychology to convince people to get on the damn thing that we're building. That's what you have to do. I'm really happy to support the person who finds the way to convince people, but that's where we are.
But to piggyback off of the other thing, if you're not going to look at, say, getting folks onto a different road, the other thing that you have to do is connectivity. I can say the joke is you can solve everything with 2-lane roads, but they have to be crisscrossing, connecting everywhere.
One more comment from Bob, and then I'm gonna.
He said it was a behavioral problem. For years, I was in charge of parking for Spotswood Baptist out here on Lafayette Boulevard. And many times I would see a family of 4 that had 2 teenagers, and the husband would, or the wife would be in the choir, and the husband didn't want to come to choir with her, but she'd have to come early. And they would have 4 cars in the parking lot for 4 people, because we're independent people. And that's what he was just saying. You got the attitude is that we all want to be independent. And how many of us took any kind of transit to get here tonight?
you can encourage. it.
But that's a connectivity.
But please read my dissertation. You have just hit on that. It's called hyperflexibility in transportation traffic patterns.
I really object. I really object to him saying that we can't change the metrics. There are a couple of metrics that are messing us up that can be changed. One of them is we can't charge impact fees due to state laws. We can't tell developments to pay their own way because the state laws say you can't. They restrict just a few things, like you got to put in streets and electricity, but you can't charge them to put in transit. That's a metric that can be changed. All you got to do is go to Richmond and get it changed. I make it sound simple. I know it's darn near impossible, but it is a metric that he says can't be changed, and I say it can be changed. The other metric is on the federal level, and that is if we were allowed to charge congestion pricing, that would be another metric that could be changed. And I'll also say that small areas can support transit. I lived in this town when there was only 12,000 people, and we had a bus system that could get you anywhere you wanted. Thank you.
Okay, all right, we're gonna move on to the next subject. I think, thanks for bringing that up, John. It was a really spirited conversation. But I think it segues into the next item, which I had him put on here. RTA, which as a Spotsylvania, I apologize for the way we treated you on that, or not necessarily. I understand why they do it. However, I feel like in the discussion with the Spotsylvania board on why they don't want to support an RTA at this time is one of the things that really stuck out to me was there was no clear. We have examples. There was no clear regional transportation projects that we would use that money for. So until we develop clear cut, it's been studied, this is what it does to the numbers, maybe there's some transit, okay? Why should we tax the citizens unless we know what we're going to do it for? And I have to agree with that. So I'm not saying we're going to solve the world's problems tonight, but over the course of the next year as my chairmanship, what I would like to do is develop those projects regionally, Stafford, Fredericksburg, even King George and Caroline, who is anyone here from King George or Caroline? Oh, there you go. Oh, thank you. Thanks for coming. And work regionally. There are regional projects that will help everybody out, but we need to get them kind of identified, internally studied, costs no money, right? I mean, we're paying you anyway, right? Right? Internal studies, right? And then if they warrants a small study, we pay for the study because nothing happens without a study.
Only projects, not projects and strategies.
Well, no, I'm going to bring up strategies too, Robert, because you know what? When I first met you, I was a little wondering about you, but you've really worn off on me a little. I'll be honest with you, because here's what we'll get to, and Yolanda might be able to speak to this, but our zoning laws do not help us in the problems that we have.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Years ago, let's go back to the old days when you used to live above your store, okay, in the little towns, okay. In 1972, I think, when the Clean Water Act, they changed it. Well, now you got to have industrial over here, and you got to have commercial over there, and you got to have residential. Nobody can be near each other or over top of each other or in the same building because of building codes. You've seen a little bit of that back to these neo-traditional neighborhoods like an Embry Mill. They've kind of tried it. It doesn't really work too good just yet because I think the densities or markets, I don't know, and it'll probably evolve, but it comes down to zoning, okay? And I know Spotsylvania is doing a new comprehensive plan next year, 2025. We're doing a new one. But I think when it comes to looking down the road, 2050, 2100, we need, I know we can't study that far out, but we need to be thinking that far out, okay? And instead of having a city of Fredericksburg and then just take every farm field and cut it up in 3-acre lots around it, it does not help our transportation system. What you need to do is develop nodes like Bowling Green. Sorry. Maybe I don't want to develop Bowling Green.
King George.
Oh, okay, King George or King George or Dahlgren
Dahlgren, yeah.
or I have a feeling we've already messed up Stafford, no offense. I mean, I just don't know where else you can put a node there. You understand what I'm saying? The other thing our region struggles with is we have I-95, which is a double-edged sword, okay? It's great that we got it from a tax revenue standpoint, with people jumping off to get gas and hamburgers and stuff like that, but it also brings traffic. And we have to deal with it for some odd reason. I don't understand why we gotta pay for the Fed's road, but and then, Ian, can you please illustrate to us the deal with Transurban and whether we can expand I-95 anymore without buying them out?
They have a 99-year contract to the state to run the express lanes, and all of the financial arrangements are agreed. Part of the contract says that we cannot add lanes to the regular lanes of I-95 or any of the major parallel roads. So US 1, you can't add a lane to it without paying Transurban for adding the lane. So it's locked down for 99 years, and the only way out now is to buy out the contract.
You dump it down for me, so basically we can't.
We can't hear you.
I'm sorry, I just want somebody to dump this down for me, so we can't build a road unless we pay a company to build a road?
No, so in order to convince a company to build the express lanes, we had to guarantee them a future income stream.
Right.
And to guarantee them a future income, we had to sign a contract to say that they can operate the lanes and charge a toll fee in order to pay back the cost of building the express lanes and some profit for the company. If you go build more lanes, then nobody's going to use the express lanes, and they won't get any money to pay for the cost of building the express lanes. So therefore, the agreement says that we will not build another lane on US 1, and we will not build another lane on I-95 for 99 years while they have a contract to operate and manage the.
So if I may, there was a study done. Put out these beautiful little brochures and basically. Supposed to help more come up outside the box, come up with a better comprehensive plan. Or what anybody's political affiliation is, the Tea Party was on the rise and they. That's agenda 21, and every supervisor, like, keep going. And they all backed away. So I don't know if you find that, but it basically is what you're talking about. And I remember the. It was basically like how Europe is developed.
Right,
Literally, like how, and I was like, what are you people talking about? This is literally how Europe is developed and how you can get around and you have transit and everything's here and it's walkable, and like, why would you be against this? It will keep us from becoming a congested mess. It will keep us from becoming what Dahlgren has become today. But yeah, so Tim Ware is when he was here, and I mean, the George Washington Commission put in a ton of money to create this study, and the brochures were beautiful that they had. I don't know if I even still have mine, but you can find that.
I think you're possibly talking about the 2012 scenario planning exercise.
I don't know.
So I'm not sure how much of those records we still have, but I think it's time for us to do a new scenario planning exercise.
Well,
because things have changed.
I really
Oh,
believe.
yes, but I'm just saying, it was literally like what you are talking about, and it
Right.
was, and you basically, you had an A, B, and C. And the reason was because because King George, our population was only like 17,000 still, you had a B for, a county such as, Spotsy, and then you had a C because Stafford was already bigger than else.
I just think, with the nodes, well, let's go to cluster subdivision. No one's ever adopted that ordinance, and I don't understand why. Right now, up in Stafford, they're cutting up a 700-acre farm into 100 6-acre lots. Okay, instead of putting 100 lots on 150 acres of it and letting the guy farm the other 600, right? Not everybody needs to mow 6 acres. You understand what I'm saying? And I've never understood why none of the counties have adopted that ordinance. But that one drives, the other thing goes back to VDOT. Why does VDOT need to build 5 miles of subdivision road when we can have the same amount of houses on a mile? And maintain that 5 miles, which they won't, but you understand what I'm saying? And
Well, the answer to that question is you can charge a lot more for each house.
because they have 6 acres, I think they're charging enough for a half acre at the moment, but I won't get into specifics on that. I mean, that's all kind of market driven, but, anyway, I only just, on this B item, I just wanted to kind of steer where I really want to go in this next year, other than what we have to deal with on your stuff. But I really think we need to come up with a list of regional transportation projects, transit projects, or something else, or changing the way we do things, Rupert. You understand what I'm saying? We got to work with the counties. We're encumbered by AP Hill, by Quantico, by the river, by the interstate. You can't go north-south because Quantico is got us slammed right there at 95.
But for transit, you have to have a large number of people that are going to the same proximity. So military bases are actually the best. You've got a lot of people that are gonna go do a job in that one location.
Well,
The other
used to
thing-
be a bus that run to Dahlgren from
Right.
downtown.
And the other thing is it's gotta be convenient. I mean, if you have a transit station that's next to a supermarket, that's next to the daycare
Yes.
or a school,
And drive
people
in.
can come home, grab their kids, get their groceries and go home. Yeah, when,
Right now, nothing's convenient. Right now, unless I'm commuting to DC, why would I mean,
It's gotta be-
nothing is, unlike Europe where I can walk to the station and take it to go shopping or to the movies or whatever, the restaurants. There's nothing like that here.
Well, and you hit upon it perfectly. It's unless you're going to DC.
Correct.
Everything is built around going to DC.
Yes.
And we're more special than DC, and
Yeah.
we should build it that way.
and I'm curious with this not being able to add lanes to 95, what's gonna happen? Is 301 actually gonna be the bigger growing?
Yes.
Honestly, if you want to look to 2100, it should be Interstate 85.
Yeah.
You should take 85 where it stops in Petersburg, bring it right on up around a bend, and take it up a 301 corridor all the way to Annapolis, cross 50 to Delaware to New Jersey,
Skip DC, you know how many people would want to skip DC completely?
or in Baltimore.
And Baltimore.
That's why they built
This-
this bridge.
Somebody's, Alan, you've been quiet all night. Go ahead.
I've been quiet, but raised my hand.
No.
That's not the thing I'm gonna do, just yell out to you next. I'm trying to bring it back to section B here. I'm hoping that you can kind of provide a little bit of information, because as you know, from Spotsylvania, one of the 3 supervisors is in favor of RTA, but the other 2 are not.
Mhm.
And you're talking about having large regional projects that we could potentially use an RTA to try to get funding for and so forth. What could be more bigger than the river crossing and Parkway that didn't, get the support for a large regional project to create an RTA as far as those other 2 supervisors? If you have any idea, I'd love to.
Listen, I argued with him, and in fact, it's in the minutes of these meetings that, I voted against going with the study because it did not have the word Spotsylvania in it. Okay? Because when you go to do was it the NEPA study that's going on right now? When they took the word Spotsylvania out of the first sentence of that NEPA study, instead of studying from the Caroline County line to the Culpeper County line, they're only studying between the city and Stafford. It's a very, because Spotsy didn't want it. They didn't want to be part of it. It's maddening to me, okay? Because it's not a regional look
Right.
as far as I'm concerned.
Well, it's not like regionally, people from Spotsylvania wouldn't ultimately try to use it if necessary.
Correct.
Yeah.
Right.
So I
Listen,
agree with.
I think there should be 5 bridges across the river, if you want my personal opinion.
Right,
Okay?
there will be probably someday.
Well,
Despite Rupert's.
Also be here though.
Well, the majority of the committee thinks that would be a great regional project. We just think it's in the wrong place.
Now, I do
That's
believe,
what it is.
didn't Spotty come back 6 months later and ask that be added to that study or a different study? Or am I dreaming that?
No, there's a recent proposal, I think, in their, one of their plans that they proposed a river crossing down at New Post. So that was one, and then during some of the stakeholder meetings, they said that they were developing, I believe, internally options with a river crossing further west.
Okay.
So,
And if they got that further out west, then they'd be happy to join in and say, okay, then this is a regional project. But if it comes in into Central Park, they said that that is not a regional project.
I don't think the decision was so much on that as it was the tax thing,
Right,
this particular year.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I'm hoping that's not so that people just are concerned about holding their position.
Yeah, me too. Let's not talk about politics. It drives me crazy because the transportation project takes 20 years and they can only see 4 at the longest. Okay, it's a day shorter every day
Right.
that they're looking at. But anyway. Mayor.
I just had about the RTA. And I don't know, because I don't go to RTA. Is the reason why they don't want to do RTA because they don't see transportation visible in their area? And because they don't see transportation visible in their area, they feel that belonging to something that's not even viable in their area is just not viable for them to even agree to have an RTA, especially not having a real understanding of what an RTA does. And again, taking the political part out of it, and Ms. Alice, please correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm not familiar with this RTA. If we have an RTA, aren't we susceptible to get more money to fix our roads and to increase transit? But if a county does not, so like I understand for King George and for Caroline, I can see why they won't be a part, there's no transit there. So why should they be a part of something that's not even visible to them?
Some of the conversation at the Spotsylvania Board of Supervisors meeting at the time was to say that they feel that they would get enough money from other sources, so they don't need an RTA. So they believe that some of the municipal bonds that they have currently have not yet been spent. And some new projects like Kalahari and I forget all of them will bring additional taxes into the county. And so why do they need an RTA? And then the other half of it was, well, we don't have a list of projects to fund. There are no shortage of projects. The long range transportation plan has several $1 billion of projects for which we don't have funding, right? So there's no shortage of projects. There's a shortage of agreement as to which projects we should support.
That's why I bring this up, is we need regionally to agree, okay? Spotsylvania, I don't agree with the way they're thinking, but I'm not an elected official there, so I don't, I'm sure they have under different pressures, but I think I think the RTA is coming regardless whether we want to or not. I think the state is really who's going to tell us whether we're going to be in it or not. Now, the exercise we just went through was to try and get into it on our terms. Okay. But I know I can see the big picture enough to know we're the missing link. Northern Virginia has one, Richmond has one, Hampton Roads has one, the whole 81 corridor has one. We're the fastest growing region in Virginia, and we don't have a way to fix look at I-90, even I-95 after we just spent $250 million on it, still backs up southbound on certain days, and I don't understand why. So now you want me to pay for another lane on the interstate? No, I'm looking at the federal government on that one. Y'all need to fix that stuff, or we need a parallel interstate. Or until Transurban, the pound sand go back to Australia. It drives me. I ride around a tractor for hours on day thinking about this stuff. I should be thinking about something else, but I think about this stuff and it drives me crazy. All I want to do is I want to do what we can do on the Citizens Transportation Advisory Committee. That's to come up with a list for the politicians and say, these are the things we all agree. This is it. Pass it up to the next thing. Vote them in, vote them out. Okay. That's all we can do right here. And on that, I'm going to move on to your next point. Any other discussion on that? But I think it involves not just road projects, Rupert. I think we need to change the way we develop things. And honestly, and I've said that in this in many meetings, especially Sponsy's Transportation Committee meeting, is that developers get a bad rap. Okay, but at the same time, they've built us a lot of roads that we wouldn't have if they hadn't built them. Okay.
Shouldn't have.
Well, is it the only way we could have gotten them done? And sometimes you gotta give a little to get a little. Okay, maybe a developer will build your.
Depends on how strong your principles are.
Maybe you can find a developer build a light rail.
Sorry, I think light rail is ridiculous.
Okay, well, what do you want to do? Ride around bicycles or walk? I mean, what's your
Walking is
preferred?
nice.
I don't mind walking either, but all the stuff I do in a day is not all there together.
I have a little problem with the logic though, just because everybody else has an RTA, doesn't. We
Listen.
should do it. Maybe everybody else screwed up by getting an RTA and we just joined in the screw ups.
Well, they're building a lot more roads than we are. But you're not per road, so
Sorry,
they built a lot more roads than we
and
built.
that's a problem too, roads that we
Yeah,
didn't want,
and-
roads that we're now gonna have to pay. Remember,
Yeah.
So you, so if you know what the pulse is for, the other outlying county. Was talk back then about an RTA, and when I was on board in King George, we were adamant about not coming in. From the standpoint of not that we were against the RTA, we actually then tried to go with the northern neck, smaller counties. Our concern was if we joined and you're getting our funding, as you can see, just by looking at the outside and the projects, right? You've got 10 projects, one's King George, everything's over here, Spotsy, Stafford, Fredericksburg, right? That was our concern, was you would be taking our money, our support, our funding, but at the end of the day, would we ever really see? Cause like this is, our project's number 7. Does that mean that's number 7 as far as priority? Does that mean it's just number 7 on the list, you know? But we were unsuccessful in creating an RTA with the smaller counties. They just didn't.
Yeah,
see the
probably
need.
not.
So I can tell you, at least then, King George County understood and recognized the need for it and was supportive of it. They just weren't, their fear, and I don't know what the gauge of the board is these days, but the fear then was that we would never actually see any results from it.
Well, the reality is where do we go to the doctor, and where do we go to the hardware store, and where do we go to shop for clothing? We come into Fredericksburg.
Mhm.
Correct.
Part of King, sorry,
No, you're fine. Like I said, I don't know what the gauge is today, so.
part of King George's problem is that they don't have enough money to fund a study to work out what the projects are that they need to fund with the RCA.
Yeah.
So it's a
Catch
vicious,
22.
it's a vicious circle. Until you have a planning study, no one's gonna give you any money for a project.
Correct.
So that's the problem.
Alan,
And the way the RTA was attempted to be structured would have taken 30% of the money that the RTA was able to receive and send that back to the counties. So there would have, if King George and Caroline had, wanted to be a participant, they would have gotten money, which may have helped to leverage towards creating studies and other things.
Well, as you can see, it never actually came to fruition.
Right.
And the gas tax, you're paying it anyway in
Yes.
Caroline and King George, you
Yes.
just don't get any of it back.
Back.
The
Correct.
RTA is the only way you'll be able to get it back. You're paying it today.
I think we pay too much in taxes,
Yeah.
but the reality we live in is we don't have enough money to do what we need to do. And,
Any way to get some of it back to us is a good thing.
oh, right, yeah, right now we send it, some of our taxes goes to Hampton Roads
That's
and,
right.
yeah, so, I mean, anyway, it's a sore subject, but that's the task. Next subject.
Now I'm gonna touch on all those things in this project too. So, the
Good segue, by the way.
yes,
Yeah.
actually, no, we will actually talk about some of those in a roundabout way. We're asking who pays for the transportation? This was asked at the previous meeting. Kind of previously, we said we know that transit isn't paying for all of their costs. What about roads? And I said, And I kind of listened to a lot of the comments. So I went back to that last meeting, right about that hour mark. If you want to kind of listen to what that, I tried to combine everybody's kind of questions and comments and try to catch as much as I could through that, because we were weaving together kind of a series of questions. But it's really coming down to who pays for what. There's kind of because it was paired with the VRE discussion, what we used to do versus what we're doing now, what might be done in the future. So I kind of took that approach. I'm used to kind of diving into this. I'm not the financial policy group guru. I'm more transportation. I kind of dabble in this, but taxes are very complicated. They get muddled. They get to the point of where you're like, oh, I got an answer. I got 3 more questions. Why is that not making sense? So keep in mind, I'm trying to keep this very broad, simple, and pulling as much as I can off the shelf. So I'm not doing my true archival research capacity. Included tonight is basically federal pre-pandemic and post-pandemics for both road and transit, a little bit of data for both. I'm looking at a federal and Virginia comparison, so I'm going to kind of outline what Virginia does versus what federal and a couple of the other states. We're looking at the fare box recovery for transit, so what are they getting back? What are people paying to use the service? And then looking at road user trends. When I'm saying road user or road user fees, that includes your gas tax, that can include your DMV taxes. If it is a tax to use that vehicle, that's what's being lumped into there. And then we're going to talk about post-pandemic examples of road user fee dependence. So if you're completely dependent on your gas tax or your vehicle registration tax, what happens when the pandemic? Because I came from a state that did very well with road user fees. So, the transit doesn't pay. What about roads? Typically, road users pay for less than half of their road costs. And that has been a declining trend since basically the 1950s. Virginia, in comparison to the nation, it's actually in the bottom 5. We tend to pay the least amount through our road user fees for our roads. It's below 40%. It's about 38 to 39%, depending on kind of year and a little bit of fluctuations. So our fare box recovery is actually online with a lot of heavy rail. So roads and heavy rail capacity is paying about the same, give or take. And really, the first federal road tax wasn't for the roads. Let's get that set. It's actually for deficit reduction for wars. Oregon was the first state that actually applied a state fuel tax to its roads. It was actually not a standard practice. However, as you can see, it's 1957 is when they kind of started tracking it. Really, what the idea of putting, say, fuel taxes into the roads was more of an interstate development project. So at that point in time, we've kind of paid off some of our war debt and we're trying to build the interstate system. That's where the idea that gas tax goes into the roads is kind of more linked with the development of interstate. So it's pretty high. And then by the 1970s and fuel embargoes, you start seeing a dip. And then by the early 2000s, you see a dip again. I kind of hit a little gray line here. Some of my dissertation was looking at fuel economy standards. I looked at how policy conflicts. So we based our funding roads with fuel. If we have a policy that tries to mandate increased MPGs, use less fuel, you can see that the non-road user amount of money tracks almost identically with changes in fuel economy standards. So we actually have conflicting policy going on. So another trend that we've been seeing is that this little red line is the federal government. This little line is, the blue line is state government, and purple. There has been a gradual trend of putting more and more of the road user costs onto state and local governments compared to the federal government. Federal government's been capped at its fuel tax since 1993, 1996, depending on how you interpret where money gets spent. These giant incursions are actually infusions of cash from general fund and other tax revenues into the highway trust fund. So these big bumps aren't gas taxes or anything else, they're other taxes. So you can see the federal government's been augmenting basically this fairly stable line of road user gas taxes with other funds to keep the highway system kind of going.
Before you leave that slide, this graph is not adjusted for inflation. So I would imagine that the lines should be trending downward if you adjust for inflation.
This is just federal the federal receipts for each given year.
Right,
So
Right.
that's $2,002 is $2,002. This is $2016 in 2016. It is
right.
affecting for that.
So it's misleading that we're not really paying more and more, we're paying less and less. And, with dollars adjusted for inflation.
In the last 20 years, I don't think there's been that much inflation. I mean, obviously the last few years have been rough for us, but like, I don't think there's enough to make a difference now.
I'm pulling from federal highway, sources are at the bottom of the present.
So actually on the score, Rupert is correct, because the gas tax has not been adjusted since 1993,
I think.
93.
Yes.
So inflation that has occurred since 1993 on construction of roads and maintenance of roads has eaten away at the federal portion of the contributions towards that. And so the National Gas Tax Trust, I forget the name of the trust.
Which was fine.
Has run out of money and gone bankrupt effectively. So that's what those spikes upward are, because they've taken money out of the general taxation from your income tax and all sorts of other taxes that you pay to top up that fund because inflation has eaten away at it. Because they haven't increased it since 1993.
Basically, what you're saying is for each one of these dollars, we're getting less in what we can get out later as it goes on. So I can provide you the value inflation, you can see it drops. Nationally pre-pandemic, I'm gonna talk to you about it. Which states are bringing in the most money from their road users and putting it into your roads? Notice Virginia at this point in time is 39%. We are the outliers. We're with Wisconsin, and strangely, Alaska and North Dakota, and Arkansas are very, very low. Alaska and North Dakota are low because they basically tax their crude oil going out of the state as an export. That's what they're taxing it there for. Other states like Idaho and Tennessee and some other states, they actually do recoup more money from their road users fees than they do, but they don't necessarily put it back into the roads. Even somebody like Kansas and Florida, which are 55% and 75% respectively, actually will use that money for education and other things. So there's a lot of dollars being traded through different revenue sources in and out of it. So North Carolina is pretty high. They like to pride themselves as that their fuel tax, which is much higher than Virginia, and their road user fees pay for as much more as a percentage of their road costs as just about anywhere else. So they have a very strong relationship there. If you look at national trends, I put the modes and then I inserted where the highways were for 2021. As you can see, commuter rail and highways, VRE, here you go. VRE, PRTC, they're right in there. Big commuter buses, we're right in that group. And you can kind of see that BRT, streetcar, intercity bus, you can see the drop. Light rail has some of the lowest capture because they tend to be in smaller cities where you're trying to recapture and build that. They're not built it. When you build rail, you build it for 100 years. You don't take it as where we're going to get the next spot. It's a bit different of an animal. So when you start looking at how we're coming in, you can see traditionally states get about a quarter of their funds from the feds. They generate about 40% from their highway users, and then they have to augment with other sources. This is the national average. Virginia is much different. 40% comes from other sources. Virginia accounts for about 1/5 of all use of local funds across the nation. Virginia dips down into local funds, and this can come into a lot of weird things. It can be your grantor's tax, it could be RTAs, it can be different things. We use a lot less of federal funds, and our state highway users only pay for about 1/4 of our funds.
Hey.
Yeah.
I had a question about this slide.
Okay.
What's the highway user revenue if it's not tolls?
Well, gas tax, vehicle registration tax, vehicle sales tax, if it's dealing with your vehicle and you're paying a tax on it, it's lumped into that group. So it can vary based on state to state, depending on how they want it. So for vehicle registration, if you have an electric vehicle, you have to pay an additional road use tax. And so that's also lumped into it.
You're making an unfair comparison between roads and transit here, because you shouldn't compare a tax with a fare box revenue.
It's a use fee.
Huh?
Whatever you want to call it, whether or not you're paying, is what does the user who's accessing the facility What do they have to pay directly for that use that goes into what
It
they're
doesn't go
doing?
directly into, it's a tax that can be used to build orphanages.
Well,
It
a
could be
fare
used
box
for-
is just a use
What?
tax at the door. A fare
Sorry?
box is just a use tax at the door if it's a government entity.
I'm
Like,
saying it's a
a
tax.
stamp is still a
I'm
tax.
saying you're unfairly comparing roads with transit because you're comparing a tax with fare box revenues. Now comparing fare box revenues with tolls, that's fair. I can go with
Oh,
that.
okay, 1%.
Huh?
Tolls to use a very specific road in Virginia is 1% of our use that's going back into the roads. However, but that's not how, we don't charge tolls at the full cost to use the facility. 95, even the express lanes, that whatever that price is, isn't the true total cost to recoup, potentially. There's other folks, because to access 95, you gotta access, let's just say Route 17, which you have to access, say Sanford Road, like Al has to access a toll road facility. He's got to use a huge network to get there. And in order for that toll facility to do it, it's got to draw from a giant network of potential users. So the way that roads have traditionally been funded, other than by property tax, that's traditionally how they were funded pre-interstate system. You're mixing a lot of dollars in. It is definitely like a melting pot salad type scenario of funds where we traditionally think of a use tax of you pay a fee to use something, say either it's via the gas tax or your registration, if it's a plate tax, heck, inspection fees, I think even really, anything that's kind of going in there is only making up this portion, at least within Virginia. Now, if you want to say federal funds, there's a section of this that's technically a use tax as well. But with the highway trust fund being insolvent, how much of that varies depending on how much money that it needs to be infused to keep it solvent.
Well, that's fine, but it still doesn't change the fact that you're misleading people into comparing.
He was just-
What we're saying is that transit, people who ride transit pay more for their fair share than the people that use the roads.
Remember, all he was trying to show is that the collection doesn't pay for the cost to run the system, just like here.
I agree with, I
That's
agree
all he
with
was
that.
trying to show, that just the same as for our roads, what we collect doesn't cover the cost, the same holds true for transit. That's all he was trying to show.
I agree with that wholeheartedly. But what I object to is that the comparison of transit with roads is unfair.
So that was revenue, state funding for it. How are they actually being used? Because just because you're collecting it doesn't mean you're using it in the same way. And in Virginia, you can kind of see the breakout. So if you actually look back, 27%, we're kind of matching that with our motor fuels and vehicle road use tax. Other taxes are getting split up. We have bonds rolled in here. You can see federal highway. This is basically the federal funds coming in here. We got other agencies, general funds, road and crossing tolls, and local government. So again, it's mixing a lot of things, but if we think our gas tax is paying for the roads, it's a lot less. It's paying about 13%. Fare box recovery for a lot of transit agencies are about that. We're looking at kind of almost apples to apples in comparison of how we do that. Now, vehicle motor carriage tax bumps that a lot higher, but again, transportation, you start looking at it, we start trending a lot closer to, we're paying about the same thing. Everything in transportation is both kind of, you're not paying your fair share as well as you're paying it somewhere else. If we do a deeper dive into VDOT's funding sources, I kind of highlighted here in red where gas taxes are coming in. And in green also has gas taxes, but they're not necessarily going back into the state coffer. So Central Virginia Transportation Authority, they get their sales tax, or sorry, their fuels tax, I shouldn't say sales tax, their fuels tax back. So it goes back to, so the kind of the big RTAs are basically, they get it in the pot and then they get to withdraw it and near right back for their own local use. So they kind of get popped out there. Then you start having these weird things with the TTF, the CTF, improvement things. Basically, there's kind of a storage and discharge happening. Think about it as a reservoir. So you have the Commonwealth Transportation Fund and the Transportation Trust Fund. About half of this fund gets spent, and then the other half kind of gets put in savings, then withdrawn back out. It's trying to stabilize the income flows, okay? Because in some years you can have more or less. Commonwealth transportation, they get from fuel tax, vehicle tax. They get sales tax. If you start looking what that other is in our slides, you're seeing that. And it even gets a little bit wonky exactly which funds they get, because there's a little couple of weird conditions. They could actually get more or less depending on what the general fund need might be. Our recommendation tax is going down. So there's our transportation authorities as specified, tolls, and other funds that may be appropriated by the General Assembly. So they can basically both pool, donate, and be a donor for different funds, and then it kind of gets put in tier. So we got basically our whole version of the trust fund happening. And so money kind of moves in between these. You tend to spend out of this one, but this one's kind of like your savings checking account. You pull it in and out as needed. So you can see where these funds are. They kind of follow the same thing. We pay about, out of all of our spending, we do about 40% into construction, maintenance and operations about 30%, and it all kind of gets divided up from there. So pre and post pandemic. So WMATA was before the pandemic sitting at about 38%. They were basically on parity with our road spending. Now they dropped to 12% with the post pandemic. They've really kind of hurt. Their rail, which was kind of their best recapture mechanism, was at 53%. It's down to 15%. So that's where you see this big drop. Their buses were at 20%. It's dropped to 7%. So it's kind of been this kind of issue that they're not getting as much in their fare box coverage. Some of those are displaced by other subsidies and incentives, but also that they're not capturing as much. Fredericksburg Go was actually just under 9% previously. Now it's under 5%. Fare free kind of is that. I think it's been hovering around 2%, but it's kind of a weird thing is how do you get money with but fare free, but they have other kind of revenue potential sources there that I'm just not 100% clear on. PRTC and VRE, they were basically number 5, number 6 tied for basically the biggest recapture fare box. They were paying for themselves more than anything else, but they've kind of hit. These are the type of programs that really kind of suffered during the pandemic, and it hasn't bounced back as fast. Now, these are 2022 numbers, so this is definitely their low. It's trending back up, but they're trending back up a lot slower. So the last blue line is your commuter rail. Basically, the big money makers for transit, I should say, asterisks, the ones that recovered the most fare box, were hit harder and are recovering slower because they're choice riders. So they're the ones who can telecommute, and so the response back has been plummeting. If you're dealing with more demand response, so these are your paratransit or even your local bus service, they responded back because they have a higher number of transit-dependent users. They have to use it. It's the only option, and so those have responded better. But you can still see that they are still below. They're missing 1 out of 5 riders still because you still have a kind of a choice impact with other telecommute options and just change in general travel behavior. And finally, I'll leave you with this. So I was at an NPO that was looking at a $1.4 billion deficit in just our region. And that was, and you're funding all your roads through the gas tax and to a lesser vehicle registration. If all of a sudden people stop driving and stop buying cars, because that's what we did during COVID, what happened? We were basically in emergency mode. Eventually, kind of the updated funding is that they infuse a lot more money. They make it back up. We're still looking at over $500 million of pulling projects out. Just like, let's just say, Garrisonville Road, we know we were planning to widen you in, say, 6 to 10 years. We had a 10-year step, so that made it a little bit worse. But guess what? We're going to have to kick you out. Like, they were literally kicking out potential projects because they didn't have the money. Or they say, we can keep everything in there, but we won't be able to build it until well after 2038. So that was our 2 choices. So in some ways, I kind of beat up Virginia by saying, hey, look, 40+% comes from other sources. And your road user fees aren't as much. If you come from a state that was the other way, that was actually a problem. I do remember times where I'll say, hey, look at Virginia. They're not having as much kind of critical moments like this post-pandemic. I was like, well, they infused the sales tax and other stuff like that. And they're really complicated. Please don't make me research Virginia. I kind of know enough that I don't want to look into it any further. So now I get to give you this presentation, but there are pros and cons. It's not necessarily one's better than the other, but just understand that to make transportation, to fund transportation, it's usually pulling from a lot of different sources. And if you get dependent on one, it can help a lot and it can hurt a lot. So they have to basically, it rebounded and they kind of had to do a bailout and kind of other things. They use general funds to fund interstate projects, but that was it. So I'll leave you all there. If you have any more questions, reach out to me. Otherwise, I think let y'all on.
Discussion?
No, thank you.
Yeah.
Very nicely done.
So how can we learn more about how Virginia's funded? The key summary here.
Research, I provided links. We can go down the rabbit hole.
The key points here are that the road user is not paying to use the roads. We're having to subsidize the roads from other sources like general income tax and other forms of taxation. Person driving the car is not paying enough to create the road that they're driving on or use the road that they're driving on, maintain it. We're having to dip into general sales tax more than 50%, and in Virginia, according to that anyway, Virginia gas tax is too low. Way too low.
If you want to fund roads, use the gas tax. That's the attitude. I will say, this is looking at a lot of construction. We've spent a lot of money in construction. Federal government pays for construction. The states have to cover the maintenance. So that's where a lot of funds go as well.
Well, you showed that Virginia was below the national average in the tax that it has from gas tax. You also showed that we're 5% below the national average, what we get from the feds. Wonder why we're so far below in both.
So
right there.
That depends. The feds give I think it's allotment based on population road miles. They have a formula, and basically each state kind of gets that from the formula. So if you bring more local funds, that will change the percentage dependence. So if you aren't bringing a lot of other funds, this will become giant as a percentage. So it's proportional to other funds being used.
Yeah, you've got to be careful. Those two are not related. It's a percentage of the pie, but every time you change the numbers in the pie of the other items, the percentage of the federal funds change, even though the number of dollars you get from federal government does not change. It's the pie that's confusing you because it's not a dollar value, it's a percentage. So the percentage, it hides the numbers. When you change the other numbers, your percentage drops even though you haven't changed $1 on your allocation from the federal government. It looks smaller because you made all the other ones bigger, or it looks bigger because you made all the other ones smaller. It's relative, so it's a moving target.
That 39% versus 27 is what really bothers me, because just in the past week, price of gas went up 20 cents. Well, I would much rather see it go up 20 cents and go into that Virginia section up there than to see it going where I know it's going. And I think most everybody else here in Virginia would like the same thing too, but we just aren't seeing it happen.
And state fuel tax varies. In South Carolina, it's like a certain number of cents per gallon. In other states, it'll be a percentage of the cost of the gas. So it varies depending on state by state, and even in Virginia, if the percentages are going, because RTAs do have an impact on that final.
So you hear politicians, and I used to be one, right? You hear politicians complaining that we're always funding transit. Well, you're also funding roads because the people driving on the roads are only paying 27% of the cost of the road. All the rest is coming from people who don't even have a car, right? Maybe, right? It's not one-to-one. I'm just saying.
It's like we have public transit here.
The people who have a car are not paying the cost of the road they're driving on. So to blame transit users for not paying the 100% cost of the bus, well, we're not doing that anywhere. Airports, you think the cost of your ticket pays for the security guard in the airport? No, the federal government's paying it out of your income tax. You're not paying it when you fly. And the same thing with harbors and the same, every mode of transportation is subsidized by the general taxpayer, where no users are paying the full cost of any form of transportation. It's always subsidized.
Good. Moving on to the TIF amendments and modifications. Man.
We have one to approve, adding sidewalks, to, Route 1 for pedestrian accommodations. This is an amendment that's open to public comment. The policy committee will look to approve, this at their next meeting, so this is your opportunity to make a recommendation or endorsement or not. For, the first option.
I move to endorse resolution 25-01.
I second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes.
Option 2 is a modification.
Nays, Rupert, sorry. Rupert first name.
Okay.
All right. Motion passes.
Option 2 is a modification, so this is more of a inform that VDOT is moving money between its maintenance program and its bridge rehabilitation. They're just swapping money in between. This is to notify you. You have the option to endorse it. Modifications like don't require endorsement, but in this MPO, the policy committee does at least give a affirmative action to say, yep, that modification is good.
I move to approve resolution 25-02.
Second by Alan, all in favor?
Aye.
Any
I
opposed?
said aye.
Okay. All, motion passes. Next one.
And finally, this one is open public comment. The next one. Option 3, yeah, scroll down. So this is opening public comment on the Germanna Point Drive extension. So no decision about whether or not the project is, it's just a decision whether or not to open public comment on this amendment.
I move to endorse resolution 25-03.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
For the discussion part.
Oh, do you want to discuss?
I was gonna mention that this is a rare event here, having this resolution, because it involves an interparcel connection. Something I've been hammering at for decades around here and not seeing much of. And so it's kind of nice to see one that's sort of an interparcel connection.
Thank you, Rupert. We voted all ayes?
Yep.
All right, motion passes. Next item on the agenda is staff reports, VPRA, Potomac Creek third track.
Okay. Long story short, they're expanding the tracks to 3 lanes, and in order to do so, they actually have to make improvements to roadways that are crossing it. And one of those things is going to result in a road closure, and actually it's going to be an extensive road closure. So they're doing improvements at locations, but I believe it's number 3 that is the issue. So they're adding the 3rd track. This is the existing bridge. It's actually kind of in horse shape, but what they're going to have to do is remove the bridge, create a significant detour, and rebuild the structure to accommodate. So this isn't something, so the Leland Road Bridge requires a closure. There are 2 detour routes. They actually made one for general commuter or civilian traffic versus passenger vehicle traffic, and one for trucks. They are trying to specify that because they don't want to send big trucks through roads that might not be able to handle it. It's going to be a closure for about 22 months. It's big. They're having a public meeting. Do I have it? Well, this is the detour route for regular kind of community traffic. So it's going to have to kind of loop around there using Farmer House Road and Morton Road. Trucks are going to have to go much further out and then up. And they are developing a timeline and everything. Again, they're looking at closing towards 2028. So it's still ways out. So it's not like the road's going to close in the next month and throw everybody in chaos. They're still in that process, but they're trying to, because it is a big detour for a long time, they're trying to get out ahead of it as much as they can. And They are having a, yeah, there we go. I was looking for that part, but we condensed it. Public meeting at Conway Elementary School on September 18th. So if you want to know more, they're going to do a full presentation of the PC, but I would recommend if you're interested in this, attend that public meeting at Conway. Okay. What's up next? This is where I always forget what I'm going to jump in.
River crossing.
River crossing, okay, everybody's favorite little story. So basically we met with BPAC, and reached out to those members because it's a lot of staff that are bike ped specific, to say, hey, we're doing this, we're including an analysis of kind of the trails around, start kind of your work through your internal process with all the community stakeholders. We want to start, basically get the ball rolling on how would you want to connect with this facility. Facility is just recommending like a multi-use shared use path on one side. How you're going to connect is going to be up to the jurisdictions. So we said we're using 200-foot wide corridor studies. Again, here's the design schematic that is generally being proposed as an idea. Start having those conversations. Again, big corridor, the road network's a lot smaller, and there will be kind of optimization along that. So just because it's a 250 wide corridor, it doesn't mean it's always impacting. We gave them some preliminary information that allows them to know. And I will notice that the consultants have since changed this. This is now actually a 2, not a 3, because they were counting this section here, which actually did not reach the trails. So they're revising that. But they got some of the information, very basic level, to start having those conversations and generally start thinking, because we outlined, and because I hate this projected forward, but there's a lot of green trail networks, both private, proposed, existing, informal, that intersect with that. And we're saying, hey, start thinking about this. We got an update from the environmental side, so they took into consideration some of the resource protection area and resource management in the private farmlands. We now have that in our analysis. It overlaps with a lot of our existing data, but we're kind of keeping it and letting the consultants kind of decipher what they want to do with that. They've included and updated recent zoning changes. So I know Al, if you attended, some of those things where they're looking at parcels impacted might have changed since then. And they'll be available at the next stakeholder meeting. Finally, we're in the middle of the modeling side. Yes.
Was there anything done regarding the RPA's north?
Yes, they have Staffords. They've had Staffords. The city was the outstanding one.
Okay.
So that's the one that they did not have previously. So that's the reason why it's a picture. Because I could grab it easily because I had to go chase down the city, then chase it back. They're in the middle of the modeling. This is actually a modeling result. I've intentionally made this a complete mess that you don't really know what you're looking at on purpose. So it's basically a spy shot. But our model, or the big model, is basically done. It's kind of going through final validation and a couple of little just kind of make sure that it's actually saying what it's supposed to be saying kind of work rather than building it out. Right now, the big issue is the Visa micro simulation. While we have this is becoming a bigger issue. So we announced at the last TAC, hey, we got a public meeting. And then literally later that afternoon, we get a call from the consultant that said we have a problem. Right now, we have a disagreement between which modeling we do and which one VDOT is requiring. And until we kind of do that, and the technical analysis says you have to use VSIM 11, but it doesn't specify if you have to use 2021 or 2024. And just because they're both the same program doesn't mean it. VDOT kind of validates each revision, and when they expect it to have it validated and when this project's going live, might not line up. So we have to make sure that whatever the model results, VDOT okays on before we kind of run the micro simulation. And if we have to build, we currently are using the 2024, if we have to build it out in the 2021, we can't backport it as easily as we would hope. We basically have to do that, and then we have to go back and check with other modeling activities to make sure that we're not getting a wrong answer, and that basically takes a lot of time. So we've had to postpone it. We kind of know that it's probably going to be available later in November. So that's kind of a big kind of hurdle headache that I have the space booked and everything, talks, even hopefully
Policy committee and tech.
Okay, so the policy committee last met in June, so it's been a while, but kind of on hiatus. They approved some tech modifications. There were some discussions about the RTA as well. Scroll on down. They got the same VRE system plan. They approved their smart scale applications, and it's kind of the same meeting that we had in June as well, just with discussion about what to do with the subcommittee. So made recommendations, and that was that. There hasn't been any new action from the policy committee since.
How about your smart skill applications? Have any feedback on that? I heard there was some rumblings of disgruntledness.
So projects that we they recommended supporting, they're all submitted. Like everything come August 1st, it is a mad rush, so that we're literally getting projects from entities at 4:57 with a 5 o'clock submission deadline. So there are some things that we're working with VDOT to kind of tap down kind of the last minute kind of discrepancies, but that's normal. It's something like we'll get something from VDOT that says, hey, we're about to look at this. We get something from the jurisdiction, say, no, we don't need that, delete it. And then we're like, okay, jurisdiction is saying, VDOT says, why did you do that? Now I have to get an ex-engineer to come in and sign off and approve on whatever new changes. So there's a lot of moving parts at the end. Different jurisdictions decide to change what they're using as local matches. That's common. But as we kind of get in it, there's always a little bit of, we're at 98% of the way through the door. We're panicking over the tube, but there's going to be some cleanup after it. But everything was submitted. They're all processing the projects we did, but they were minor changes to the project. Both the jurisdiction and VDOTs, it's pretty common. It's always a backhanded rush. So
when do we usually find out what it gets?
January. It takes that.
Tech committee.
Okay, yes. So the TAC met earlier this month. They postponed any smart scale thing. Basically, everybody was still hungover over that process. It was very simple. They got an update on the road closures. They did their tip amendments, and well, they got into a discussion tangent over what. Scroll down for a second. With demand model, it was a quick. They talked about some of the awards that it received, but generally speaking, I think this was one of the shortest TACs. I think they probably talked more about the third track creek, kind of what we discussed very quickly, a little bit more detail, but it was actually fairly kind of a quick meeting. So I was like, okay, yeah, that was good. Move on because I'm gonna go home and sleep after this.
All right, next is reports, and Al, I know, has a report.
Yeah, as you know, we have wanted and talked previously about trying to provide some input from this committee advising the consultants. I was thinking that since we were supposed to have that public meeting on September 26th, that our only meeting to provide that would have been at our September CTAC meeting. Now, obviously, it's going to kind of push back a little bit. So what I had created was a few different presentations, basically going over everything in depth regarding the different options that have been proposed, so that we could kind of look at them and start to say, this is good, this is bad, what are the pros, what are the cons, and so forth. And I had gone forth and looked at everything in great depth, because I got a hell of a lot of time to do, like you're riding around in a tractor and I'm just sitting at the computer at the same time. So if you could go to the second slide. All right. First thing I wanted to do was to actually add to this pitch, both there's Gordon Shelton Boulevard that we have down there, Celebrate Virginia Parkway. We have Route 17 over here, Stanford Drive, and so forth. And the purple part that you wind up seeing is essentially everything that's in Celebrate Virginia. Celebrate Virginia by the Silver Company. I wanted to add the different developments that have been taking place. Previously, the Belmont Park one was going to be rezoned, and the supervisors have approved that. So now it is an approved project rather than being a proposed project.
And so approved rezoning, they have not approved the project.
Yeah, well,
Yeah, I just want to be clear.
yeah, because there's a, oh, in a minute now. There is a approved Celebrate Now project that has been taking place right there. We also have a project that's called the Villas at Celebrate that has not gone through the planning commission yet. It's made some strides, but this is actually a recreation of a previous project that they did in 2018 that was at that time called the Villages at Greenbank. And then, of course, down south of the river, there's the Neon project, which has been approved. So I just wanted you to get an idea of these are the potential things that might cause changes to some of the routes, some of the parkway paths. Okay, next one, please. Okay, these are the very original initial paths that were created by FAMPO, which was essentially just lines on a map in different locations so that they could wind up starting to do modeling to see what might happen regarding traffic if any of these different ones were chosen. Option A starts at the end of Commerce Parkway. It was going to go through the Belmont Park project. It was going to come down and actually cross some of the home sites off of England Run Lane, and then come down close to where England Run strikes the Rappahannock River, and then pass, of course, the quarry, and I'm losing my voice, obviously, and then connect to Gordon Shelton Boulevard. B was going to use a road that was going to be created from Commerce Parkway in green up top, across the Greenbank Road. That would have been a road widening from 2 to 4 lanes. And then there was going to be a new road connected down here. And then from there, the kind of yellowish line was going to go through here east and then drop south and again connect to Gordon Shelton. C, which is in the light blue, was going to follow Celebrate Virginia Parkway down to its southern portion and then go through here to connect to where Gordon Shelton is. And then finally, D was going to be, again, the Greenbank expansion, the new road, and then go all the way down into Cannon Ridge and head east. And the bottom of the slide is kind of missing, but it was going to connect to both Caldy Silver Parkway and Bragg Road, or Fall Hill Road, actually. Okay, next slide, please. Now, the consultant made some modifications, not terribly different, but option A was now going to connect in a different location off of Commerce Parkway up at the very top. It again was going to go down through here. It actually was going to where Commerce Parkway is at the top, the way they have drawn just with the lines, it was actually right away going to wind up go directly through some industrial buildings that are there. The right of way, as on one of the slides that was previously shown, is supposed to be 100 feet wide. They're looking at 250 feet, but the actual right of way is going to be 100 feet for the 4 lanes. Plus the bike ped path that's adjacent to it, so. All right, it was gonna go down through here, through Belmont Park again. I had reasons to contest why it was actually going where it was, and I'll kind of show you that quickly. It was going to move further east, enabling it to go around where those home sites were. It actually was gonna come a little bit closer to where England Run intersects with Rappahannock. And then again, it was going to connect to Gordon Shelton in a different place. Then, of course, they made the adjustment of taking both B and C and have them extend off of the bottom of Celebrate Virginia Parkway. It was going to go east and then south and then go across and miss the Neon project. It was going to go just north of it. And then for C in light blue, it was going to again connect from Celebrate Virginia Parkway, go south, and then head east and connect. Actually going through 2 different apartment complexes that are right here. There's Jubilation, and then there's another one that is part of the Silver properties. It was actually going to go right through the middle of that. One thing I actually should say regarding the D one, which still uses Greenbank Road and widens it, is the road that connects, this would be an extension in red from where Commerce Parkway ends, going across Celebrate Virginia Parkway and actually going through the center of another silver community that's there already. So, and then of course, go out to Greenbank and come down and so forth. And now this was not going to connect to where Fall Hill was anymore. It was going to connect just to the Caldy Silver Parkway at that location. So I looked at all of these, like I said, in depth, and I have a couple of the presentations to get into greater detail for them. But obviously, there are still some conflicts that we have. For example, B, at that point in time, before they added another one, was going to go directly through that. So that was obviously going to be a little bit of a problem. The idea in my head was these developments may or may not actually take place, some of them, but it makes sense for our paths that we create for wherever the parkway is going to be, whatever option it is, find a way that they can kind of work together, find a way that there's less impact, and so that both the developer and what we wanted to do for the parkways they could work together. So that's why I came up with what's shown on the next slide. Actually, as Dr. Rod said, the consultant has created a new path that was going to avoid what you see in B1 with this potential development, and now avoided it and still avoided the Neon project. So B2 has been added as well. Okay, sorry, next slide. Okay, so these are the ones where it says citizens model. That's me. I'm a citizen. We're part of the citizens. This is where I wanted us to ultimately get into discussion regarding things that we thought may be better than what was within the consultant's proposals and things that we could consider. I got into these in greater depth in some of the other presentations, but quickly, this winds up being connected for option A in a different location that's from what the consultant had. All right, it also goes through Belmont Park in a different location, and there are reasons for that. It goes further east away from where these home sites are, and some of these home sites are relatively important because literally in this neighborhood, there's livestock on those properties. There's cows, horses, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It also now goes a little bit further away from where England Run is, and yet it still winds up connecting, passing the quarry and going there. The idea I had for Route B was going to, again, connect off of there, off of the bottom end of the Celebrate Virginia Parkway, but then head east, avoid the potential development, and go through here in a more perpendicular way,
But again, still with the neon project and connect there. C is exactly the same as what the developer had kept. Biggest change is what I did with what would be advantageous for option D. If they were going to use the infrastructure that exists for B and C with the consultant's plan, why go through the tremendous expense and disruption to create a path that goes all the way out to widen Greenbank Road, where many of those homes are very close to the 2 lane that exists, and widening it to 4 would not only be a disruption as far as trying to get all the traffic, but a lot of those homes would actually lose their frontage for their home sites.
A couple of them might actually eminent domain and lose their house.
Right, so the idea that I had is instead of doing all that, why not, if it was going to be possible to use Celebrate Virginia Parkway already for the other options, why not just take D and do the same thing, connect from the bottom of Celebrate Virginia Parkway, and then go down and cross over just like it had in the other models. So that's what I wound up coming up together. And again, there's a lot more detail to all this, but we don't necessarily have to do that today if we're not meeting with the consultant potentially next month or anything like that. I can get it into greater detail. And also, if we could, I suppose the other 2 presentations that I had could be maybe just put into the minutes for someone to be able to look at rather than spending time doing it right now. Since it's already, unless you guys want to just sit here for 10 more minutes. Up to you guys.
Anybody else?
If you're gonna put it in the minutes, what I recommend is you put it in the minutes so that we can see it and put it on the agenda under member reports, so that if we
Okay.
have discussion at the next meeting, we have, since we're the September thing.
Okay, so we could include it in the September meeting at any rate anyway? Yeah, because we're not really discussing anything right now, but this would give you the opportunity.
That way, if
Spend
we
time.
we come back at the next meeting.
Right.
Was that a motion?
When you're saying add it to minutes.
Was that a motion?
Is that a motion?
Well, in the agenda right now, for example, we have this presentation.
Like I can click on the link
Right.
right now.
Yeah.
So if I click on that, if I save that email, I can still click on it and continue to.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
we don't take down the agenda, so it's
Yeah,
gonna be.
so
Right.
yeah, so you can just click on it and still see it.
But could it be, added so the rest of the
Two
people
materials.
see it? I just want the other people to have the opportunity to see the other presentations.
Is that a county road? Is that a county road all the way back to the golf course, or is that still private?
County Road 1916. Yes,
All the way to the
it's
golf
in the
course?
secondary system
Okay,
of roads, and that was done in 2014. The Celebrate Virginia Parkway was originally built in 2003. Pledge State Road in 2014.
okay.
I mean, one of the things that's part of what the other presentation shows is there have been a lot of concerns stated relating to Celebrate Virginia Parkway not potentially being able to handle the drive. So I did a tremendous amount of research on that, actually. One of the things that they said about Celebrate Virginia Parkway is that it was potentially too narrow. We have in our plans for, the right of way and everything, that each lane should wind up being 12 feet wide. All the lanes and all the turning lanes, and there are multiple turning lanes that are on Celebrate Virginia Parkway, are all 12 feet wide. If I were to actually go down through Route 17 towards Route 1, as you get closer to Route 1, those lanes are actually only 11 feet wide. And north of the intersection between Route 1 and Route 17, north of there, Route 1 is only 11 feet wide, all the different lanes. So the width of it was never going to be an issue because it's definitely wide enough. The other thing was because there was comments that the substrate underneath the pavement was not going to be suitable for handling additional volume as well. Well, again, it was made a state road in 2014. And in addition to that,
like I said, this project in 2018-19 was proposed by the Silver Company under a name called the Villages at Green Bank. The same exact project essentially went before the planning commission. And when the planning commission started to ask questions, the representative for the Silver Company, who had, proposed all of this, confided that the actual volume that the road, Celebrate Virginia Parkway, was built to handle 66,500 vehicles a day. So obviously, the previous studies that have been done before with the East-West study and also for the study that was done before the NEPA study, I think it was just over 40,000 vehicles a day would potentially use this route if it was going to be connected to the road. So add the existing traffic, which in 2019 was only 7,000 vehicles using it. I mean, 7,000 vehicles plus 40 is still quite a bit underneath 66,500.
Not so much of a matter.
That leads me to believe that it could handle the additional volume connecting to a road.
One thing good about that, you've got plenty of right of way. If in future years you needed to widen it, you've already got the right of way there. The bad thing is all of those subdivisions right there, every person in there is gonna be fighting against that. Cause some of them have already come to me about it and said, we don't want that coming through here.
No, and I understand that, and they want, one of the questions they bring about is the noise and so forth.
Yeah.
But why in the world would you have built a 4-lane road that has very wide medians, while allowing all the different turning lanes to get into all the other, communities and so forth? And also has an existing 8-foot wide path alongside the road that could be used for bicycles and pedestrians along the entire route. And then it also it's lighted. And it also has stormwater basins entirely along the whole route that lead to stormwater drains that lead to stormwater basins. It has all the infrastructure that you could ever hope for. It winds up being from where it was going to connect to down here about 2.5 miles of existing infrastructure. Any of the other routes that are involved, you can see the majority of any kind of construction is generally going to be winding up being north of the river. And, you're talking about large lengths of pathways that will, impact the environment quite a bit. I've heard reasoning for the city has often said, and I've heard many people say it, many of the supervisors and council members saying that option A is the only one that they would consider, because anything else that crosses the Rappahannock causes the river to not be pristine anymore. But I'm still unsure what pristine actually means. Is it pristine for the condition of the water? Or is it pristine for recreational use? Because if it's recreational use, I know a lot of people who kayak and fish and boat everywhere else along that.
Except now they can do it in quiet.
Well, think of, if you're gonna do a bike and pedestrian path, consider this as well. If it winds up being this close to I-95, the bicycle and pedestrian path that's on the bridge is basically, where do you want to be here and look this way out towards an open river? Sure, that'd be great. But if you look in the other direction on that bike and pedestrian path, what are you looking at? You're looking at 95 and it's pretty darn noisy probably, right? If you had a bike and pedestrian path anywhere else, you can look left or right. And not here, 95, I think would be more enjoyable. A lot of this actually ties into what's going on in Belmont Park, because in one of the other presentations, there is only this building that has a potential user. The rest of the 132 acres, about 130 acres of it, does not have a user. It has no intent from anyone to build on there. And the original intent of the developer was actually to put a sports tourism center basically there with all athletic fields and indoor facilities and everything else. And there's a movement right now to actually try to go back to that original idea that he had. Excluding, of course, the one building that, you know, he has a trucking center in. So that literally would be a actual destination on Route 17. I don't know too many other people who are gonna bike or jog across the bridge to go up to Route 17 unless they have a reason for going there. So there's a lot of stuff going on. It's all regional. So-
Yes. If you had my vote, I'd put 2 bridges there.
Yeah,
And I'll get with you as to where to draw the second one. Yes.
all right.
Yeah.
But that's one of the ones that Mr. Fowler brought.
I mean, I understand the connection to celebrate, but, all right, very good presentation. You got 2 more on the
So I
website, or we're going,
move to add, Mr. Watkins to the member reports, presentation at our next meeting and continue.
second,
Good.
second, favor?
I
Opposed? All right, passes. We look forward to your other presentation. Any other, member reports? Anyone? Public outreach and acknowledgement. Is that you? Huh? Has anybody reached out to the public?
That's finally what we're gonna do with VDOT, with the safety concern on Austin Ridge.
Yes.
That's basically the
Okay.
same thing, but I'll follow up with you on that one.
All right,
like that was days ago.
Yeah, I think that's if we had something from the previous.
okay.
meeting.
All right, another public comment, anybody want any public comment? Anything? All right, future agenda items, anybody want anything to agenda items? Other than Alan's,
Other than, or on the bridge.
all right. Second, all in favor?
Hi.
All right, we're out of here. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Congrats for Eugene for